Let's dive into a chapter of history that often gets overlooked. It's a time when nomadic warriors, masters of the horse, swept down from the steppes of Central Asia, conquered parts of India, and, get this, became kings. The empires they built would go on to change the course of world history in some really fascinating ways.
And really, this question is at the absolute heart of our story. Because this isn't just about conquest and battles. It's about what happens after the dust settles. It's about migration, adaptation, and the incredible fusion of cultures that happens when two completely different worlds collide.
And we're not talking about a brief invasion here. This was a transformation that spanned half a millennium, 500 years. The empires these nomads built became this crucial crossroads, a true melting pot. And as you're going to see, they didn't just rule a chunk of land. They actively shaped the development of major world religions, especially Buddhism.
All right, so our story kicks off with the first major wave to arrive on the scene, the Indo-Scythians.
So who were these Indo-Scythians? Well, they were part of a bigger group of Iranian-speaking horse nomads known as the Sakas. Think of them as the quintessential steppe people. But here's the thing, they weren't just migrating by choice. Nope, they were basically pushed out of their homeland by this massive chain reaction of events.
What happened was like a massive game of dominoes tipping over across all of Central Asia. Way out in the east, a group called the Xiongnu defeated the Yuezhi. So the Yuezhi flee, and who do they run into? The Sakas. They push the Sakas south, and then this whole process repeats itself, forcing the Sakas further and further from home until they eventually spill into what is now Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India.
And this is where they really make their mark. A leader named Mawis leads the Saka conquest of Gandhara and the great city of Taxila. And this guy, he's not just some raider. He establishes a kingdom, a whole new power, right on top of the territory that had been ruled for centuries by the heirs of Alexander the Great, the Indo-Greeks.
But here's the really wild part. The Indo-Scythians didn't just erase the culture they found. They did the exact opposite. And in doing so, they kicked off one of the most remarkable periods of cultural fusion in all of ancient history.
To get what happened, you have to picture the world they just walked into. The Indo-Greeks had this sophisticated Greek-influenced culture. When the Indo-Scythians took over, they didn't just tear it all down. They were super pragmatic. They saw what worked, the government systems, the style of coinage, the art, and they just adapted it, layering their own Iranian and Indian traditions right on top.
And the proof of this cultural mashup is literally everywhere you look. Their coins often had Greek gods on them. We have these amazing stone carvings from a place called Buna that show Scythian soldiers in their distinctive pointy hats decorating Buddhist monuments. And maybe most important of all, they totally embraced Buddhism, becoming powerful patrons just like the Indo-Greek kings before them.
And if you want one object that perfectly sums up their role, it's this. This is the Bimiran casket. It's a small golden box that was found inside a Buddhist monument, right alongside coins from an Indo-Scythian king. And what's so incredible is that carved on it is one of the very first depictions of the Buddha in human form. This is a huge deal, a landmark piece of art, directly connecting Scythian rule to a pivotal moment in religious history.
But the story of the Saka was really just the first chapter. Another wave of nomads was already on the way, and this one was destined to create an even more powerful empire. Hey, remember those dominoes from earlier? Well, the Yuezhi, the very people who first pushed the Saka south, eventually followed them. One of their tribes, the Kushans, rose to the top and swept down to forge this colossal empire that completely overshadowed what the Indo-Scythians had built. History really does have a funny way of coming full circle.
And right at the heart of this Kushan story is one legendary figure, an emperor whose name would echo for centuries. Kanishka the Great.
The Great King, King of Kings, Son of God. Wow, you don't get a title like that without some serious power to back it up. This inscription from his statue really gives you a sense of his ambition and the divine status he was claiming. This was no tribal chieftain, this was an emperor on a truly grand scale. And just look at the sheer scale of his domain. Kanishka's empire was huge, a true bridge between worlds. It controlled the mountain passes and the major trade arteries of the Silk Road, connecting the Roman Empire in the west with Persia, India, and China in the east. He was, without a doubt, a global player of his time.
Now, just like with the Indo-Scythians, Kanishka's coins tell a really fascinating story. At the start of his reign, he kept up the old tradition, minting coins that featured Greek gods like the sun god Helios. It was a clear nod to the Greek legacy of the region.
But then you start to see a shift. He begins to feature gods from his own Iranian Central Asian background, gods like Mithra. It's like he's making a public statement about his own roots, blending them right into the multicultural fabric of his empire. And then comes the big one. Kanishka becomes the first monarch in history to put the image of the Buddha on a coin. This was absolutely revolutionary. Think about it. It was taking Buddhism out of the monastery and putting it directly into people's hands, into the marketplace. It was an imperial endorsement on a scale nobody had ever seen before.
Kanishka's patronage went way beyond just coins. He commissioned this massive stupa, a Buddhist tower, in his capital. Chinese pilgrims who saw it described a jewel-covered tower soaring to an estimated 210 meters. That's nearly 700 feet. This would have been one of the wonders of the ancient world, a staggering testament to both his power and his faith.
So, after 500 years of rule by these nomadic kings, what was the ultimate legacy? Well, it turns out their greatest impact was as connectors. The Kushan Empire basically became a super highway for Buddhism. So first, Kanishka's support turns his empire into this hub of Buddhist learning. This attracts monks who then start traveling north along the safe Kushan-controlled trade routes. And finally, Kushan monks actually reach China and set up translation centers, directly planting the seeds of the faith in East Asia.
So in the end, these empires weren't some temporary interruption, they were the bridge. For half a millennium, these former nomads governed the very heart of the ancient world. They created this unique synthesis of cultures and made possible the flow of goods, ideas, and religions on a truly global scale. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The story of the Indo-Scythians and the Kushans was pretty much buried for centuries, yet their influence was profound. It leaves us with a final question to think about. How many other forgotten empires are out there, silently forming the foundations of the world we live in right now?